Welcome. This presentation deals with part one of the history of law and medicine beginning about 5,000 years ago. I am Dr. Sandbar, a physician and an attorney. Early civilizations often intertwined their social precepts, religious doctrines, legal codes, and medicine. The ecclesiastical courts and canon law were concerned with religious matters as well as medicinal issues. Magic also played an important role in treatment. Some of the medicine men were sorcerers. They used charms and talismans, typically an inscribed ring or stone that is thought to bring good luck and have magic powers. Medicine men administered a vegetable drug or some remedy by mouth, which was accompanied by incantations, dancing, grimaces, and magical tricks. The relationship between law and medicine was recorded more than 5,000 years ago. In 3000 BC, the Chinese Materia Medica provided information about poisons, including aconite, arsenic, and opium. In China, medicine herbs were discovered when the Chinese were collecting food. The earliest records of Chinese medicine are those of the ancient or legendary period, comprising largely mythology. They were full of legends concerning the founders of Chinese medicine. In 2737 BC, the Chinese emperor Shen Nong was considered the father of medicine in China. He is still worshipped by native drug guilds as their patron god. He discovered Chinese tea when a tea leaf accidentally fell into his bowl of hot water. Shen Nong was credited with identifying hundreds of medical and poisonous herbs by personally testing their properties. That was crucial to the development of traditional Chinese medicine. But while doing research on herbs, to his misfortune, Shen Nong ingested a poisonous plant which caused rupture of his intestines and death. The Chinese have maintained that the human body has vital energy which circulates through channels called meridians. These meridians have branches connected to bodily organs and functions. The Chinese also believe in the presence of acupuncture points. In 1236 AD, a Chinese book entitled Washing Away of Wrongs was published by Xi Huan Lu. It outlined procedures to be followed in investigating suspicious deaths. The book stated that the medical examiner should make a thorough and systematic examination of every corpse, no matter what the condition was. The Chinese book advised the medical examiner about the problems associated with counterfeit or factitious wounds. It described wounds produced by blows from fists or kicking and deaths from strangulation or drowning. The book also distinguished between the bodies of drowned persons and those thrown into the water after death. It distinguished between ante and post-mortem burning. The medical examiner was cautioned that nothing in the inquest should be regarded as being unimportant. Between 1700 BC and 1100 BC, the Chinese made inscriptions on oracle bones describing the use of wine and hot water as medicine. They also showed how needles and bronze knives were used as surgical instruments. Beginning in 206 BC, the Han Dynasty developed a highly sophisticated system of penal law in China, which persisted through the Qing Dynasty from 1644 until 1911 AD. The Chinese law was divided into official law and unofficial law. The official law was the rule and authority of the emperor. The law was divided into ancient China penal law and administrative law. The emperor was considered supreme and above the law. He could make new laws, change the existing laws, and could make decisions. The second important contributor to law and medicine was ancient Egyptian medicine, which dates back 4,600 years. The ancient Egyptian civilization lasted from 3,300 to 525 BC. Indeed, some of the earliest records of medical care came from ancient Egypt. The Egyptians believed in prayer as a solution to health problems, but they also had natural or practical remedies such as herbs. And ancient Egyptians had professional doctors who were highly respected. Around 2620 BC, Imhotep was the vizier of Djoser in Egypt. He was a healer. He was also an architect, a high priest, and an advisor to King Djoser. As a healer, his medical writings rejected magic for dealing with illness. His premise was based on the theory that illness was caused by the environment rather than the gods. The Edwin Smith Papyrus was the earliest known writing on medicine. They were partly authored by Imhotep, who wrote about trepanation, trauma surgery, anatomy, cranial sutures, the external surface of the brain, cerebral spinal fluid, and about the diagnosis, treatment, and prognosis of 48 medical problems. The step pyramid in Saqqara was the oldest known pyramid. It was designed by Imhotep. He was a master architect, and he authored an architectural encyclopedia which was used by his peers for millennia. The acts of the ancient Egyptian medical man were circumscribed by law. Egyptians believed that an angry god or evil spirit caused disease. However, they formulated a number of valid treatments and remedies. They differentiated various stab wounds and made determinations regarding the cause of death, whether it was natural or not. Let's turn now to the third important contributor to law and medicine, and that was the ancient Semite tribes. About 4,000 years ago, nomadic Semite tribes used cuneiform hieroglyphic writing to memorialize their ideas and culture. They inscribed on clay tablets and then chiseled them into stone. The Semite tribes developed a managed healthcare system, which was utilized by Hammurabi. Around 1700 BC, King Hammurabi of Babylon published the Codes Hammurabi on a huge stone, which is well preserved as the Babylonian Code of Law of ancient Mesopotamia. The code is the oldest written law which includes legislation pertaining to the practice of medicine. The Code of Hammurabi covered the topic of medical malpractice and set out criminal liability for improper and negligent medical care. Penalties ranged from monetary compensation to cutting off the surgeon's hand. Fees were also fixed. Judgments followed the traditional and harsh eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth punishments of the Semite tribes. But physicians merited public esteem at that time. They were well rewarded with adequate fees. They were also carefully prescribed and regulated by law. When they failed, the penalties were considerable. The ancient Greek law and medicine is more recent. Before the 7th century BC, the Greeks had no official laws or punishments. If someone were murdered, one of his or her family members had the right to kill the murderer back. That resulted in many bloody and endless fights. About 620 BC, the first law of ancient Greece was written by Draco. He was the first recorded democratic legislator of Athens. His task was to be a lawgiver for ancient Greece. Draco's laws were very harsh. The English word draconian means unreasonable laws. Soon after Draco, Solon, who was an Athenian statesman, changed the laws, making it fairer to the Greek citizens. For example, if one stole something, the penalty would be decided by how much was stolen. His reforms failed in the short term, but he is credited with having laid the foundation for Athenian democracy. On the medical side was Hippocrates. He lived from 460 to 370 BC. He was an ancient Greek physician who was regarded as the father of medicine. He exercised a permanent influence on the development of medicine. He was famously remembered for the statement, "First, do no harm." He emphasized the ethics and law of medicine. The Hippocratic Oath is taken by physicians, and it states in part, "I will impart a knowledge of the art to my own sons and those of my teachers, and to students bound by this contract and having sworn this oath to the law of medicine, but to no others. Into whatever homes I go, I will enter them for the benefit of the sick, avoiding any voluntary act of impropriety or corruption, including the seduction of women or men, whether they are free or slaves." Athens, Greece, became the cradle of democracy. In ancient Greece, there was a knowledge of poisons and laws against abortions. However, autopsies were not performed, since a dead body was regarded as sacred. The legal code in ancient Greece, about 460 BC, was very elaborate. In addition, it was a time of great advances in medicine. The ancient Roman law and medicine is also more recent. Interestingly, in Rome in 600 BC, a law was passed requiring that a woman who died in confinement should be immediately opened to save the child. The investigators of murder were selected from the citizenry. When Julius Caesar was assassinated in 44 BC, the physician Antiochus examined his body and concluded that only one of the 23 stab wounds were mortal. The Justinian Code, which made its appearance in Rome around 529 AD, included within its provisions a precept that a medical expert would not be used to proper or greatest advantage if the expert were to be simply regarded as an ordinary witness. Therefore, he would be appearing for one side or the other. The Justinian Code stated that the function of the medical expert was to assist the judiciary by impartial interpretation and opinion based on his or her specialized knowledge. Now, I would like to end this part one with a story about the arrest of Saint Januarius, or Gennaro, by Emperor Diocletian around 300 AD. For centuries, blood was collected from recently deceased holy persons, particularly martyrs for the faith, and carefully kept with devotion and veneration. During the 4th century, the Roman Emperor Diocletian persecuted innumerable Christians, including Saint Januarius, or Gennaro, who was the bishop of Benevento. The bishop was imprisoned in 305 AD when he journeyed to Pozzuoli to offer encouragement to Sosius, a deacon who had been imprisoned. Later, Januarius was decapitated and his body was taken first to Benevento, then to Montevergine, and lastly to Naples in Italy. His body was entombed in the main church of the city of Naples, along with 2 vials of his blood that had been collected by devout followers. A great cathedral was constructed around his tomb. The priests would honor Saint Januarius by holding the vials of blood at certain times. The blood was coagulated. 1,000 years later, in 1389 AD, Saint Januarius's coagulated blood was noted by the priest who was holding the vials that it liquefied and bubbled during a procession in the cathedral. The liquefaction of Saint Januarius's blood was an extraordinary miracle of the Church, and it was repeated several times annually during good times and when they had festivities. However, the blood did not liquefy during the outbreaks of disease, famine, war, or political suppression. And that's the story of St. Januarius' blood liquefaction miracle. Thank you.